Hi everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss and I'm joined as ever by Jonathan Fadugba. And we're certainly well into the starts of the season now. Plenty of action going on in both Norway and Sweden, and it's busy times, isn't it, John?
Hi everyone, and hi to you, Steve. Yes, we are having busy times. It's 5 games in Sweden, and things are going well.
Yeah, it's busy times, and I've been watching quite a lot of the action out there, and it's quite interesting because obviously a lot of the mainstream leagues are coming to the end of their seasons, and I always kind of switch off a little bit in certain leagues, like ones that I cover, such as French League, which has been a bit of a procession for a long time now. So it's always good to have these new fresh leagues in the springtime to keep going. Have you been up to much, my friend?
And as you say, a lot of the European leagues are ending, so this is the time for Sweden and Norway to step out and emerge from the shadows and start to shine. Yes, I've been enjoying the league so far. It's been really quite interesting. There's no team that scored more than 10 goals in 5 games yet, and I think no team has conceded more than 10 goals. So very well balanced league in Sweden at the moment, and there's been a few shocks as well.
Yeah. So in this particular episode, the Norwegian section is going to be a little bit different because I've been interviewing a special guest out there in Norway, Gunnhild Toldnes from Eurosport Norway. So we're going to run with that part in the first section of the podcast, and then we're going to be talking about the Swedish Allsvenskan after that interview.
Yeah, Steve has replaced me there for the Norwegian section. I'm very, very upset. But I will yield to the superior knowledge, and I'm quite looking forward to hearing it myself as well, actually. So, yeah, looking forward to getting into that.
Yes, let's get straight into the action. Here's that interview I did earlier where we talked about all things Eliteserien amongst many other things. So here it is. And on this episode, we are delighted to be joined by a special guest from Eurosport Norway, Gunnhild Toldnes. Thanks very much for joining us on the Nordic Football Podcast, Gunnhild. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for having me. It's really exciting to talk about Eliteserien with an Englishman.
Yeah, Gunnhild does her own podcast on the Eurosport Norway, and she is a reporter. Goes to loads of Eliteserien matches throughout the whole country. And I do believe the most recent match you were at was on Monday in Trondheim. You were there to see Rosenborg against Strømsgodset. And what did you make of it, Gunnhild? A 0-0 draw?
It was a draw, and it was not maybe the best game to watch, but there was something to take from it from a Rosenborg perspective. They've been quite bad the first rounds. They just wanted to see something that was better, and they went out in a different formation. Eirik Horneland, their coach, went back to like the classical Rosenborg formation 4-3-3, and it worked pretty good. They created more chances, and they saw positive things that they can build on when going to Molde next weekend. But still, 0-0 isn't good enough, of course, and they still haven't won. So pressure on him, and the Rosenborg is still there.
Yes, we really have to talk about Rosenborg quite in detail because they're the big topic of conversation. Mm-hmm. A lot of, we actually have a lot of listeners who are from the USA, and there's a lot of Rosenborg fans out there. They're obviously quite a popular club worldwide. You might find that surprising. I don't know. Yeah. Within Norway, but we have a particular fan, a loyal fan, CJ on Twitter at Ted Cruz 8 My Son is his hashtag, and he asked a question. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but when will Horneland finally be sacked, and who will replace him? Yeah. It seems there's a lot of early panic, but is he under quite a lot of pressure, would you say?
I think it would be stupid to say that Eirik Horneland isn't under any pressure, because as a Rosenborg coach, without good results, you kind of always are. You have to win. But at the same time, the message from the board and from the club is that they are going to give him time, and I don't think he's going to be sacked if they lose against Molde on Sunday. I think they really want this to work, both because they believe in him. He has come in with a fresh energy, with new ways of seeing things, and also he's handled the pressure in the first rounds now really well. I mean, there's so many critical journalists at Lerkendal now every day, and he just responds to everything in a really professional manner. He's done really well on that perspective. And also, I think with everything that happened with the previous coach, the way he was sacked and the trial they had with between the club and him, they don't want to go through anything like that so soon again. So they just want it to work. I think they're going to give him time.
Yeah, you've been up there, obviously, to watch the game, and you also witnessing some of their training sessions. You'll know what the overall mood and atmosphere is like. Is it as bad as it's perceived on the outside, or is there a bit more positivity within the camp, would you say?
I think so. I think they really want it to work, the players as well. But at the same time, I think it's a difficult squad to lead, because these are players that are mature. They're around 30, many of them. They've been doing so well the last years in winning Eliteserien and the cup, and they're just used to having success. And now they have a coach that demands other things of them and has new ideas, and I think that's not the easiest thing for a new coach to try to turn things around in a group like that. So I think there has been some discussions in the inside club, but at the same time, I think now they really want to give him a chance as well. So I think from the outside, from media perspective, we think there's more trouble inside than it really is. Of course, they're not happy and they're disappointed and everything, but they think they're gonna come back.
Yeah, I mean, what I tend to, I'm getting asked by everyone now, even those people who don't really follow Norwegian football that much, because I think anyone who has an interest in football will see the Eliteserien results and presume Rosenborg are going to win most weeks. And, I'm getting people asking me, what is going on there? What's the problem? Well, I'll tell you what the big problem is in terms of statistics. According to Y-Scout data, their expected goals is just 3.36 expected goals in 4 matches, which is the second worst in the Eliteserien. Only Ranheim have a worst expected goal. So the problem is clearly in terms of the attacking third, that it doesn't seem to be working for them at this point in time. Do you think that is because of the new coach's tactics? He kind of is perceived as a more, well, I'm not saying negative coach, but a more disciplined sort of coach. Do you think that is at the moment he's just finding his feet a little bit in that regard?
I definitely think so. Erik Horneland's philosophy is 4-4-1-1, 4-4-2. He likes to build a solid defensive structure. That's his thing. He's not the offensive coach, and that's not how he has been putting his teams up before he came to Rosenborg. So it's a bit of a clash there, with Rosenborg supposed to create a lot of chances, score a lot of goals. And he really thought he was going to make his formation work at an early stage in Rosenborg. But he said on Tuesday after the game against the Godset, I made a mistake. I thought this was going to be a lot easier, and now we're going to stick to 4-3-3. The boys know that formation, and this is how we're going to play from now on. And with that formation on Monday, they created more chances. So I think we're going to see Rosenborg more like themselves from now on.
I watched the second half of that game. I'm always very interested to see Samuel Adingbenra come on the field. He's one of my favourite players. I actually think he's the best player in the league when he's at full fitness. That's my personal opinion of it. Mm-hmm. If they can keep him fit, do you think he's going to be a massive part for Rosenborg, or does Horneland prefer other options on the wing?
I think definitely he could be. He is one of the best players they have, but the big question here is Erik Horneland. He wants to drive his players so tough. He's a coach that says that you have to train so hard that you risk get injured, and that philosophy doesn't suit very well to Samuel Adegbenro. So his problem or his issue is to stay fit, to don't get injured. If he does that, he can be a big player for him. But I am concerned maybe the Horneland regime is too tough for him.
Yeah, and that's got to be a concern to other players. I mean, Rosenborg have had a lot of injuries in recent years. Paul-Andre Helen, for example, although he actually looks in fairly good form, I would say, at the moment anyway, but it can't be long before he goes down injured. Okay, well, at Rosenborg, let's be interested to see how they improve. They've only got 2 points on the board right now. Already, a lot of people are saying there's no way they can win the gold medal. So if they can't win the gold medal, who do you think is the most likely to win it? And two teams that come up regularly in conversation this year is Molde and Sarpsborg.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say those two teams are the most likely now to battle it out for the title?
Ahead of the season, I said Molde would win Eliteserien 2019, and I still think so. They are really exciting to watch at the moment. They didn't show up against their game away in Bodø, lost to Glimt, but besides from that, they've done the job. They look solid. They have so many good players, really strong squad. It's so strong, it's even a challenge for Erling Moe to keep everyone fit and happy because they have so many players that could be in the starting 11. But I think they're the biggest favorite at the moment. And I think they're going to take it.
I thought this at the start of the season as well. They seem to have the hunger and the best balanced squad. And obviously this weekend is a big match, Molde against Rosenborg. And it is a fixture that Molde have had success in recently. Are you going to give us a prediction for that game, Gunnhild? Do you think Molde will win?
Molde definitely looks better than Rosenborg at the moment. But at the same time, it just would be typical Eliteserien if Rosenborg win that games and hit back. So for me, it's an open game. This happened the last season as well. Rosenborg started badly, and then they met Molde, and then they hit back. It's a really special game for both cities, both Molde and Trondheim. The fans hate each other. It's going to be a really special 90 minutes on Sunday. So I think it's open. I don't think I don't think Molde is going into that game as big favorites.
Interesting that you say that. So, well, two teams that faced each other on Monday have had a good start to the season. Bodø Glimt and Sarpsborg. It ended in a 1-1 draw. I've got to say, I watched this game and there should have been a lot more goals in it. Both goalkeepers actually had very good games. I don't particularly rate the goalkeeping much in the Eliteserien, but Vasyutin and Friedrich, who I've mentioned before on this podcast, actually, I think they're quality goalkeepers. But a 1-1 draw, it's the first time Bodø Glimt have actually dropped points this season. Someone actually sent us in a question. He said, this is Liam is his name. Have Bodø Glimt had a blip this week, or will they keep it up for the rest of the season? I mean, I wouldn't call it a blip.
Me neither.
Or against Sarpsborg, would you? But they've been surprisingly good, and they're not in the position they are by luck. They deserved it, haven't they?
They have definitely deserved it. And out of all the teams, I think maybe Bodø Glimt has impressed me the most because, as you say, this isn't about luck. They have developed so much from last year. They have really good individual players that are shining at the moment, but they also have good relations. It's such a strong collective right now. They play so much better together, and this is an even bigger achievement when you think about that Patrick Berg, their midfielder. He was injured in the first round, and he was such a big part of this team. And he went out, and they managed to fix it without him as well. So Bodø Glimt, for me, is so impressive.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't think they can necessarily keep it up for the whole season, but they're not they've not been lucky. I think that's the thing that stands out with me. Statistically, they deserved everything they have. And just a word on Sarpsborg before we move on, because they always seem to me like they're the best collective team. They don't have star individuals necessarily, but as a team, they just work so well together, don't they?
They do, definitely. Such a strong moral in that team, a really strong collective, as you say, and star players. When you're talking about that, maybe they lost their biggest, one of the biggest stars after last season in Patrick Mortensen, who was their goal scorer and their leading star in front of the midfielder. So I think that's hit them pretty hard. They have Stefan Liskorovic, who is like a hardworking striker who runs all the time, but maybe doesn't score enough goals. So the question is, who will take that responsibility? Is it good enough with him and Lars Jørgen Salvesen? And they also have this young, really exciting player in Jørgen Strand Larsen who can score goals. But I think that's maybe the big question with Sarpsborg.
Yes, yeah, I think that is the big question. If they can get their strikers scoring goals, then there's no limit to what they can achieve, perhaps. So we've had a good little talk about the title contenders there. Let's just talk a little about yourself personally, Gunnhild, because there's a lot of listeners in Norway will know who you are, a regular reporter with Eurosport Norway there. But for the English listeners, tell us a little bit about your role with as a sports reporter at Eurosport Norway and how it's been going for you there.
Mm-hmm. We are the right holders of Eliteserien in Norway. So when the season starts in March, April, we pretty much live as football players. Every weekend we have 1 or 2 games. So I travel to all the Eliteserien cities in Norway, having a studio on the field with a build-up, in the break and after. And this is what we do all season long. So all the rounds, I have 1 or 2 games where I'm standing on the field. And also we have a podcast every week, myself and one commentator and 1 expert, where we discuss what happened and we look forward to the next round. And we also have this weekly Monday night show after the Monday football game, where we sit in the studio and talk about what has happened. So, but this is what I love to do, and I've dreamed about it since I was 7 years old. So this is perfect for me.
Yeah, you're very Monday night football over in Norway. I mean, we have a Monday night football over here in the UK. Mm-hmm. We have Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher do their stuff. But Norway's very own Monday night football. I mean, has it been a tough route for you into journalism? Football journalism, would you say? I mean, especially as a lady coming in. I know over here in the UK, for example, it's still a little bit difficult for females to get into the footballing field. But I do know there's a lot more equality in Scandinavia with this regard.
We are 2 female reporters here, and actually we have 1 female commentator, and that is big for me. She's the first Norwegian female commentator on men's football. And that was a big deal when she started doing that last year. I don't know what people in England would say if a woman was commentating Premier League. So we are getting somewhere, definitely. My roots here, I think I wanted this from I was so little, so I worked determined to get here. I started writing on a volunteer basis in a football magazine. Actually, it's the Norwegian Tottenham supporter magazine, because I'm a huge Tottenham fan. So I started writing for them 10 years ago. That got me a job in a local newspaper, and from that position I got into a national newspaper and just moved upwards. So I worked for it, but I think in Norway people really wanted to be both men and women in the media, sports media. So maybe it isn't as difficult here as it is in England.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a statistic here, actually. From the UK sports media, 63 writers were sent to the FIFA World Cup last year, and out of 63 writers, only 3 were female. And that is over here. It is a little bit different. It is getting better, I would say that. But you know, people kick up a fuss when we get a female linesman over here, for example. But I know in France, for example, and I'll just give a quick shout out to her now. Actually, Stephanie Frappard is refereeing in French League for the first time this coming weekend. A tremendous referee. She's done her duty in the French second tier, and now she is getting a promotion up this weekend. Good luck to Stephanie. Anyway, on your various trips around the country, do you have any preferred sort of stadiums and destinations? I mean, it's a beautiful country, isn't it, Norway? I must say. Some of the backgrounds and yes, some of the stadiums might not be that great, but the scenery is fantastic, isn't it?
The scenery is fantastic. The Molde Stadium is close to the water with the mountains in the back. It's really beautiful. And I think when you go throughout the country and meet different clubs, it's really difficult. When you come to Rosenborg and to Lerkendal, it's like this feeling of professionalism, and it's a big stadium, really nice people. But if you go to small towns like Haugesund, they're maybe even more down to earth and just so happy that we're there. So they just fix everything for us. So each city has its different charm, I would say. But of course, the games that I love the most is big games like Molde, Rosenborg, and when it really matters. When we come to the autumn and it's starting to be exciting, that's maybe the funniest games to have.
In terms of actual viewer numbers, I do remember seeing a statistic last year towards the end, the title decider in Bergen, Varane against Rosenborg. I think that got the most viewers for an Eliteserien match in 2018. But in terms of the general footballing viewing audience in Norway, is something like the English Premier League still the biggest that people are more interested in, or is the Eliteserien getting better in terms of popularity, or getting worse?
It's getting better, but we see that it's the big games that rate, and the smaller games, the numbers of them are low. So it's really different from game to game. But in Norway, of course, the Premier League is so important. So many Liverpool and Manchester United fans here. So, and also the football, of course, it's a lot better. But I think with Eliteserien, you get something else. So that's what makes it good for me. It's not the best football in the world, but it's something else, and it's our football, and the entertainment, I think, is good.
Yes, I always say to a lot of my friends over here in England, when they've got nothing to do in the summer apart from play cricket, to watch some Norwegian games, because there's a real honesty about how the league is played, in my opinion. I don't think there's as much diving, as much time wasting, and negativity as in some of the other leagues around. I say that's a really good part about the Eliteserien. So I want to chat about VAR, because obviously you're in the media there, and do you think VAR is needed in Norway, and would it work well in the Eliteserien, do you think, or not?
I know that the Norwegian referees, they really want us to have VAR, because that would qualify them to bigger games. So they're really pushing for it. I think it's going to take some time until we see it here. But if everyone else has it, I mean, we should too, if we want to compete. Like Rosenborg wants to go in Europa League and compete there in the future. I mean, I think it would be good. But I think it's going to be a long time until we have it.
I think obviously if everywhere else is getting it, then Norway's going to have to join them, really. But I must say, I don't seem to notice that many really bad mistakes in the league. I think the refereeing is actually quite good, to be fair. But
I think they're happy to hear you say that because the Norwegian managers wouldn't agree with you. They're complaining every weekend, but of course the referees are going to make mistakes. That's the way it is. They can't be perfect. That's just how it is.
We're going to talk about Eliteserien fantasy in a little bit of time, but just before we move on, I've got one other question to you about the conditions of Eliteserien matches and specifically pitches, because this has been a topic of conversation recently, more so in Sweden, actually, I must say. But in Norway, this is the debate between grass pitches and artificial surfaces. Now, if someone had watched the Lillestrøm game recently, they'd be saying, that is not proper football. How can you play on that pitch? At the same time, other people are saying you've got to play on a grass surface because that's where in the rest of the world most people play on grass. I know it's how difficult do you think it is to prepare a grass pitch in Norway? Say southern Norway, not Tromsø, because they're still frozen there, aren't they? But in southern Norway, in the spring, is that really difficult, do you think?
It's really difficult. It's really difficult, and it costs a lot of money. And I understand that small clubs think it's almost impossible, but I think the Norwegian Football Federation should make it even more easy for teams to have grass, because that's a tendency now that everyone wants it. We don't have many grass pitches left, but I think more and more people see that we have to have it if we want to develop the football we have here. So it's difficult, maybe impossible some places, but we have to try.
Yeah, it is very difficult, and a lot of money as well. Some clubs, it makes sense for them to have the artificial surfaces for sure. So, well, anyway, I just want to talk a little bit about Eliteserien fantasy now, because this has actually become quite big over here in the UK. It's taken off, and I think it's going to be even more popular when the Premier League finishes. Again, no one else has really got anything to do in the summer for those fantasy gurus out there who are obsessed with it. But and I know it's become quite popular over in Norway as well. I've seen a lot of you pundits and in the media tweeting about fantasy. You can follow Gunnhild on Twitter. Your Twitter handle.
It's my last name and my first letter. Yeah, Toldnes.
Yeah, give her a follow on Twitter. And she will sometimes, you might have to use Google Translate sometimes, but she will have some, a lot of decent information on there. So Eliteserien fantasy then. What players have caught your eye this year? Who do you need to have in your team, Gunnhild?
At the moment, you need to have Magnus Wolff-Eikrem. He scored again last round. He's expensive, I know, but he's really hot at the moment. He has 4 goals, 2 assists. He's so important in the Molde team. He's going to play every round unless he's injured, and such a good player.
Yeah, I've had him as my captain every week, and he's delivered.
Yeah, he has. Another player that is perhaps more unknown is Jørgen Strand Larsen. I mentioned him earlier in Sarpsborg. He's not that expensive, and he looks really well. He can score goals. I think he costs around 6.5 or something. So that's a tip as well. But definitely Wolff-Eikrem.
We did have a question on Twitter about the formation in Eliteserien fantasy from Neil Baxter. Which formation do you think is the best to maximise points in the Eliteserien? It's a bit of a general question, this, but do you think in the Eliteserien you need to be looking at defenders more or attackers more?
I actually don't think there is like one formation that is best for this league. Maybe it's a boring answer, but I don't think so.
Oh, it's a good answer. I think you've got to. My answer to Neil would be you've got to change it every week. Even if you go 5-4-1 Neil, occasionally, you've got to see what the fixtures are. You've got to see who's in your team, who's injured, and who's fit. So good luck, Neil. I know you've been very keen this year on the Eliteserien fantasy in general. Well, I think that'll about do, Gunnhild. It's been a pleasure having you on board, and we will look forward to following you around the country this year. And thanks very much for joining us on the Nordic Football Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, that was Gunnhild Toldnes on the Nordic Football Podcast. Again, absolute pleasure to have her on board. I think it was fantastic to talk about the Eliteserien with a native there. She makes some very good points. And I say, once again, brilliant. Thanks for coming on the show. We're going to take a little break right now. After the interval, it's going to be time to talk about Sweden and the latest goings on there. And I'll bring back Jonathan Fadugba into the arena. So, see you again very soon. Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast, and this is now the Swedish section. And there's been a lot of action in the Allsvenskan recently. A double game week has been going on Wednesday night. 5 matches were played, and I mean the one that stood out to me was Malmö with a come from behind victory against Hammarby, 4-1, John, and they're certainly starting to pick up form, aren't they?
Yeah, like the juggernaut that they are. Malmö are starting to pick things up together and putting the building blocks together like a very nice flat pack sofa from IKEA. They've scored 9 goals now and conceded 5. They've had a bit of a run recently after a bit of a poor start, in which obviously they drew with Häcken and lost to GIF Sundsvall, but they've won their last 3 games consecutively. And in that period of time, they've scored 7 goals in those 3 games. Obviously beating Östersund's Sirius away, and now Hammarby 4-1, which is a very big result. To the chagrin of Vidar Kjartansson, who came out after the game and said he was disgusted by the defeat to Malmö. Problems for Hammarby really, but Malmö have picked up some form.
Yeah, they certainly have done. And I remember you were mentioning a few episodes ago how their expected goals for and against, it wasn't a fair reflection of the results early doors. So, they might easily be sitting here with 5 out of 5 wins. I mean, they missed some penalties, didn't they, early on? So it's very encouraging for Malmö fans in that instance. In terms of Hammarby, things are starting to go a little bit down the spiral. I mean, they've had 1 win, but probably not where they want to be.
No, and on your point there about expected goals, according to Wisecout data, Malmö have actually comfortably the best expected goals in the league, 9.29 goals, which tallies with their 9 goals scored. So, they are looking good. The numbers are looking good for them, as well as the sort of results. I think they're starting to pull away now. One interesting stat there is Marcus Rosenborg. He actually has 11 goals and 6 assists in 19 league games under Uwe Rosler since he joined the club, the manager, and that's his best tally in 5 years. So he's really picked up form. He's mentioned and said after the game that obviously playing for Uwe Rosler, he's enjoying it, and the numbers are reflecting in that. So fantasy Premier League players out there, fantasy Allsvenskan players, might want to be looking at Marcus Rosenborg as someone to maybe add to their stable. He's really hit form, but Hammarby. On the positive side for them, I guess they've got the highest possession stats in the league, but possession really counts for nothing when you're 12th in the table with just 1 win from 5 games.
Yes, I mean that result certainly caught my eye, and another one that we talked about Östersund, didn't we, in a recent podcast that perhaps they've been a little bit lucky in terms of their results, but they keep grinding out the points and. Tight 1-0 win at AFC Eskilstuna. I know you watched this game, John. What did you make of that one?
Yeah, it was an interesting start to the game. It was, well contested. I thought very open at the beginning. There was a lot of fouls and injuries towards the end of the game and early in the second half, which kind of killed the momentum. Ravel Morrison, for example, is one who went off injured, as did Jarell Sellers. So the momentum was sucked out of the game a little bit, but a good win for Östersund, who I think kind of needed that, to be fair.
So what is the most impressive thing about Östersunds at the moment, would you say, John?
Well, we talked on the last podcast about their underlying stats. So to be honest, there's not much impressive really, Steve. I think they grinded the win out. It wasn't something that's that impressive. They've scored 5 goals, conceded 5 goals, and in 5 games played, they're up to 5th in the table. So very nice synchronicity there of 5s. But to be honest, they aren't really looking as good as the numbers suggest. I mentioned it on the last podcast, and I'm going to say it again. Sorry to Sean Constable and Ian Birchnell there, but they have the lowest XG in the league still, expected goals. So they're bottom of the table for expected goals, and they're top for expected goals against. So that's also a bad statistic. That means they've been expected to concede the most amount of goals according to underlying data of the league. So really, they, in terms of the statistics, they are the worst team in the table in terms of expected numbers. But it's not been reflected in results. So whether that's a cause for concern, I know people who love statistics will tend to look at that and say that's something to worry about. But they've managed to pick up some results, 2 wins. So at the moment, things are looking okay. I thought in the game today, Morrison looked quite heavy. Actually, I didn't think he looked very sharp. He played some nice passes, but didn't really. He looked a little bit just overweight to me, to be honest. I'm not sure how his fitness is, but then he limped off as well. And it was a really good battle actually between him and Adi Nalic, who's on loan from Malmö at AFC Eskilstuna. He's really been one of the standout players in the league so far, in my opinion. And I just wanted to talk about Nalic actually briefly, but it ties in on the fact that those two in midfield had a really interesting battle. There was a lot of rough challenges with Nalic on Morrison. They really were going toe to toe, and there was a couple of nice moments where they, shook hands or were getting in each other's faces, and they just had a little nice battle, I thought, which was a key part of the game.
Yeah, I've actually got him in my Allsvenskan fantasy team. One of the few good things that's actually come out of that team this year for me. I also added Islamovic from Östersund recently, and he got me a goal tonight, I think. So, but Nalic has been definitely catching the eye, hasn't he?
Yeah, and you'll be happy to hear that Islamovic's goal was really good as well. Actually, took it very well. A nice assist from Tesfalde Teki, who I rate, and I think I'm expecting things from him this season. Hopefully, he will pick up some form after a sort of mediocre season. Really, last year didn't do too much of real excitement. But Nalic, yeah, as you mentioned, there some interesting stats about Nalic. Actually, he's a young player on loan, as I said, but he's already weighed in with some goals, and he's also had the highest number of fouls in the league. He's fouled more times than any player in the division, and also had the most shots in the league, 17 shots on goal this season. So, he gets himself about a bit. He's not afraid to sort of mix it up, put his body on the line. He's quite a sort of thin frame. He's not exactly a big lad. He's a young player, but he definitely likes a bit of the rough stuff, with his fouls, and it showed in this game because he was really putting himself about. But it shows that he's got different elements to his game. Likes to shoot. He's weighed in with a few goals. He's creative. He nearly scored. He's looking good actually. He's been one of the most interesting young players of the season so far.
How is the attendances doing at AFC Eskilstuna this season, John? I know they're not the most they're not a very well supported club, are they? But have the fans been coming out in their numbers?
Not particularly, no.
That's not really surprising, is it? But they had a good win, didn't they, to start the season? But things seem to be going a little bit more pear-shaped for AFC Eskilstuna. That's actually the first time that they failed to score a goal, though. So, it's one worth keep an eye on with AFC, where they can actually, move back up the table or stay down there.
Well, they've fallen down 3 defeats in their last 4 games, and I think they were very open in this match. And I think apart from the striker, Namani, I struggle to see the quality in the forward line. So I think they're going to struggle to score goals, really. They brought on Kamara. He didn't do too much. Danny Avdic I wasn't that impressed with. I wonder where the goals come from AFC Eskilstuna. I think also defensively they lack a bit of. They brought on Rachmaninoff, who's sort of a big crouch. Sort of, he looked to me like a Peter Crouch type figure. But they didn't really offer much at all, to be honest. I wonder where the goals come from for them. Obviously Nalic has weighed in with a couple, but yeah, they're starting to slump down the table.
Yeah, I was starting to get a bit worried when they couldn't beat Örebro at home. To be honest with you, that was an early warning sign to me. But well, moving on, and probably the biggest match on Wednesday night was AIK against Häcken, and 1-0 for AIK. No surprise there. How many 1-0s have they delivered in the last 12 months in this league? Must be absolutely tons of them. But 1-0 victory. AIK, they've had a bit of slightly slow start, but they're stalking the leaders again, aren't they?
They are indeed, Steve, with their 4 goals in 5 games. Not the purists' favourite, I don't think, in terms of watching them play football, to be honest. I think Tony Pulis is probably rubbing his hands in delight every time they line up to take the field. But yeah, they're not going to win any prizes for artistry at this moment in time. They're struggling to click into gear, I think. Funnily enough, the manager switched things up tactically for this game. They've gone from their back 5, which obviously won the title last season, and they've now switched to a 4-3-3 in this game against Häcken. 4 at the back, and they went with Henrik Goitom was back in the side. Jack Lane kept his place. So they've gone for a bit more slightly, you could argue, offensive lineup, but they kept their defensive solidity, and in fact it was down to a defender to win them the game, Daniel Sundgren. So yeah, it's just the same old Oiko, really, just doing enough to grind out that win. And funnily enough, it really upset the manager of Häcken, who came out afterwards and described his team as a disaster. Sorry, not a disaster. He said that they were nowhere near winning the title based off their last 2 games, which they've obviously lost. They'd gone so well, to begin the season, but defeat at home to Djurgården 1-0, and then a defeat to Oiko away that has left their manager Alm not happy at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this stage they just needed to get the victory on the board, didn't they? Really, AIK there, and that's not what they're all about. I think it was incredibly concerning that they lost to Örebro, away from home, 2-1. That's shocking, isn't it? Really. But they rebounded with a good win there against Häcken. In terms of Häcken, they've dropped off a little bit, haven't they? There was a lot of bright expectations. They had a great start to the year, but now 2 defeats in a row. What's going on there? 2 1-0 defeats. The goals have dried up. Yeah,
they have, and Paulino missed the game through illness. Apparently, had a bit of food poisoning. I don't know if anyone from Stockholm has been to any of the local sort of eateries in Gothenburg over the last few days, but seemed to have affected Paulino's stomach there, and he was unfortunately not present for that game. And that's, we've analysed teams before, haven't we, Steve, in the past? And if we're looking at his importance to Häcken, it's massive. He's a 5-star player, really, and without him, they're a different prospect. So I think that had a big impact probably on the match. The other thing to note is an interesting statistic for you here, maybe. BK Häcken, in their last 18 trips to Oiko, have drawn 3 and lost 15.
God. I've always said this to people because I often get, particularly gamblers, ask me how important are head-to-head records, and a lot of the time my answer is it's a load of bollocks. However, when it's so lopsided like that, then I think it can get into the players' heads mentally, because that's very, very extreme, isn't it?
Very extreme indeed, yeah. And it's crazy, to be honest. Häcken are going well. I mean, the Falkenberg game when they won 3-0, they looked really fluid and they were purring at times. And they've had a good start to the season. I said before, I questioned whether they can maybe win the title. And there was a lot of talk after the first 3 games that, they could be there to stay after they picked up 7 points from their opening 9. But, these games, Djurgården at home, it was very small margins, but they've come off the wrong end of the stick on both occasions. And I think that's just kind of exposed the fact that, are they really ready to properly go for a title challenge? Teams like Djurgården or IK just seem to have a little bit more nous about them, and I think that showed in both these games, to be honest.
Yeah, well, talking about a title challenge and Djurgården, there's only one remaining team in the whole league who are unbeaten, which is quite an interesting statistic. You would expect at least 2 or 3 at this stage. But Djurgården are the only unbeaten team. They are playing on Thursday night against Norrköping, and they've actually got a tough match, a derby against Hammarby, to come at the weekend. So they might not stay top for much longer, but they're going well at the moment. One of the players that you, told us to all watch out for this year, Buya Toure, has been pretty sharp in front of goal, I do believe, John. But Djurgården, are they for real?
Well, they've started well under their new joint management team. They obviously are top of this table. I think one thing to be positive about from their point of view is they seem to have a lot of creative players, actually. Players who can maybe do something out of the blue, like Buya Toure. People who can create things like Witry. That's like Witry, who's obviously he's been injured for the last few games, but he had that spell where, those 2 games where that game where he scored 2 goals, and racked up tons of fantasy points. 3-0 win at Örebro. They beat IFK Göteborg. I saw that game and I felt that IFK looked good on the break, and I actually felt at times that IFK would come away with a win there, but they got the equaliser in the 83rd minute, and then Buya Toure went up the other end in the 88th minute, and Djurgården ground out that win. These are sort of key games to come out on top of, when you're not playing that well, and they did that. They just seem to have that creativity in the last game as well against Häcken. It was very small margins. Berg scored with a goal, and that's what I'm saying. They're just grinding things out at the moment. They look positive. They've got good, like I say, players like Jonathan Ring, who's really creating a lot. Nicholas Barkros, as I've mentioned, Buya Toure. They've got different elements about their game. They look quite, they're not one-dimensional. Some teams, I'd say, they're quite one-dimensional, but Djurgården look like they have creativity in different areas of the pitch, and it's certainly been a positive start for them in this season.
Just wondered what your thoughts are on the joint manager situation, because you very rarely hear of it in top level professional leagues anywhere, and B, whenever it has occurred, it usually ends in failure. Really, I can't think of too many examples. One that comes to my head is the Salford City documentary that was done when they're in the lower leagues. The Gary Neville owned club. And they had joint managers there that did quite well, but that's conference and well below levels. But it seems to be working well for Djurgården, though. I mean, is any one of the two particularly in control, or is it genuinely 50-50 from what you know?
It's working well so far. I mean, it's very early days. It's only 4 games. So I remember once, it's not Swedish football related, but I remember interviewing a joint management team once in non-league, Paul Hughes, who used to play for Chelsea, and his managerial partner as well, who also played for Chelsea. And they gave a really interesting interview that I wrote up about the difficulties of it and how they come to a collective decision. They seem to be very well on board with each other. They were really good friends, that kind of thing. But I remember, funnily enough, they gave this whole spiel about it, and then I think 3 or 4 months later they parted ways in terms of the joint managerial setup. I think it's very difficult. You have to have a very good rapport, I think, with the other man in charge. So I think it's hard to make it work. But in the case of Kim Bergstrand and Thomas Lagerlof, that they've started well. So let's see how it goes. They said that they've got the right feeling. They said in their opening press conference that it's good when you have 2 people to bounce off, and share ideas. So, they've signed a 3-year contract. There's no ideas that they're going to sort of not get on. So at the moment, it looks to be working well. And they've been together at Sirius in slightly different roles, but they've worked together before. So let's see how it works out.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason why it shouldn't work out, because in all other forms of life, there's loads of partnerships, isn't there? And things like that, where, you have joint managers or joint people in control. I mean, it's all about working well with the other person. You know, I can imagine me and you as a joint managers, Johnson. Where imagine that.
You have to have a very clear idea of what you're doing, I think, for it to work. If you've got two people who aren't on the same page, it's never going to work. You have to have the same outcomes, the same ambitions. I think you have to be looking at the same future. You know, you don't want one manager who's in back of his mind thinking, I'd like to manage Man United in the future, while the other one's thinking, I'll be in Allsvenskan for 20 years. You need to be on the same clear page for at least 2, 3, 4 years for it to work. Because I think when you start to lose games, that's where problems come. You know, who do the players go to? Do they get in one with one better than the other? Are they playing good cop, bad cop? You know, it can create an extra layer of sort of personal relationship problems. But if they're both on the same page and it's in complete clarity, then, you know, why not? I'm not sure if there's no proven track record of it really working in terms of winning titles. I remember Gerard Houllier and Roy Evans. Obviously, that was the most famous disaster class at Liverpool in the 90s. But, you know, I'm not going to sort of talk down on it when they're top of the league, am I?
No, I mean, they've got two big games for them, like I mentioned this week. A brief word on this Norrköping fixture on Thursday evening. I mean, Norrköping scored 4 goals last time out. I mean, this is quite a big game, isn't it?
Well, Norrköping are my tip for the title, but they've not really started well, I think. And the biggest problem for them, I think, is conceding goals. They've conceded 8 goals in 4 games, which I think is really poor, to be honest, for any team with title aspirations. Jordan Larsson's, did really well in one of their games and then got sent off. But, they've not even played really tough teams. They've conceded 3 at Helsingborg, 2 against Kalmar, 3 against Falkenberg. So that's quite worrying. I think they need to sort that out and sort that out fast. Djurgården will be a completely different prospect. Then they've also got Malmö at home in their game after that. So I think Norrköping really need to buck up their ideas, to be honest, if they're going to go anywhere near my title prediction. I know they started relatively slowly last year and then picked up form towards the end, but you don't want to be too far out of it, But yeah, it's early days. But, they're already 5 points behind Djurgården. So if they were to lose, it would be 8 points, which is already quite a big gap, isn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right there. Just talking about goal scorers, it is Larsson who's top of the scoring charts this year. 4 times he scored. Is he suspended for this game against Djurgården? Did he get sent off last time? I can't remember. Someone got sent off anyway. But looking down this list of goal scorers and assists, and one name again stands out to me. We've talked about him before, and we're going to have to talk about him again. And that's Benjamin Nygren of IFK Göteborg. 3 goals and 3 assists in just 4 games. I mean, that's outstanding, isn't it? Yeah,
fantastic. Just to answer your question very quickly there, yes, Jordan Larsson was sent off, so he will not be present. He got 2 yellow cards. Benjamin Nygren, where do we begin? I mean, I'm going to keep humble bragging about this one. As I say, I've been talking about this kid for a while. I actually went back into one of my scout reports from 2017 on a youth tournament, and I graded pretty much every single player out of about 30 players from A to D. And top of the list was, I only gave 3 A grades, and 2 of them were to Benjamin Nygren and Jack Lane. And both of them are since, justified, I think, those ratings. The third hasn't broken out yet, but I'll keep him in mind for in the future. But yeah, Nygren is the top creator in the league, 3 goals, 3 assists, which is incredible, really, for someone so young. I don't know where I can, I spoke about him on the last podcast. The player I really, really like, and he's behind this whole new sort of new look EF Core, who, one of the things with EF Core, Steve, is in the last sort of 2-3 years, I haven't really enjoyed just watching them, to be honest. I found them quite plain, quite boring, a bit wishy-washy in terms of what they're trying to do. 1 minute, maybe they're going for, a possession game. The next minute, they're going for something else. But they seem to be getting things gradually right on the pitch now. I know it's 2 wins, 2 defeats, but even in the defeat to Djurgården, they looked pretty good, I thought, on the break. They're going to be an interesting side, I think. If they can sort that defence, I still think at centre-back they're a bit weak. I don't think they really, Starfelt, for example, on Calais, they were all poor against Djurgården. I think they conceded soft goals. But if they can fix that, they've scored 8 already. Nygren is, like I said, doing really well. It's not just him as well. Paka Lagermir is doing well. Lasse Viber looks quite good. They've got a young lad, I think he's a Nigerian lad called Al Hassan Yusuf, who's 18. He looked good against in their most recent game. So they've, as I mentioned on the preseason podcast, they've nicked one of GIF Sundsvall's coaches, who's very highly rated. They just seem to be putting a few things into gear at the moment, and the biggest talking point really for them at the moment is Benjamin Nygren's contract situation. As I mentioned before, his contract expires, I believe, in 2020. They're now trying to tie him down to a long-term deal, but talks are going on. But he's like the golden child of the club at the moment. The fans are loving him, and he's the bright sort of young shining light of this new EF team.
Yes, I mean, this is a player that you've been following personally for a good 2-3 years now, following out when you're out there in Sweden, and we know there's a lot of scouts listening to this podcast. Clubs are very much interested in this player. So before we move on, just how far can he go, and how quickly? Is he going to be at risk of transferring away from the league this summer, for example? Do you think? I know he's got a great potential, but just how much and how quickly do you think?
Well, I'll be honest, he surprised me in his development. I said before, I really rate him, but I didn't expect him to, he's 17. I didn't expect him to be the top goal and assist provider within this short space of time. He's a very cool customer, really good feet, like I've said. He's good in the air. He's on penalties as well, which is a level of responsibility that, again, for a 17-year-old in a dressing room full of, experienced characters, that's a sign in itself of his maturity and the confidence that the players have in him. Where can he go? I think they're going to have a problem tying him down, to be honest, because they're going to have to give him a good contract. And as we know in Allsvenskan, players don't tend to stay that long. Look at Alexander Isak. He had a good run and it was gone straight away, to Dortmund. Nygren's had interest from clubs. As I've mentioned before, he spent some time at Brighton on trial. There's rumours Manchester City have looked at him. The biggest thing for now is, can they tie him down to a contract? Because if they don't, then the buyout isn't going to be huge. But I think there's going to be a political desire to tie him down, because if they were to lose him, it's almost like giving away a crown jewel. He's like the symbol of this new EF team. It's becoming more than just a football player. At times you need something to cling on to, really, when you're rebuilding, and it would be too early for them to let him go unless it was a crazy offer, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he certainly seems like very hot property, and I've seen his name mentioned an awful lot, on Twitter, online, and it seems like everyone's trying to get onto his bandwagon now. Even guys who don't really know much about him pretend they know plenty about him, but don't. But yes, he's certainly a bright talent and one to watch. Before we finish, let's talk about a couple more teams, and they don't really get a mention very much on the Nordic Football Podcast, but they are third currently in the Allsvenskan, Elfsborg. They're going well, aren't they, at the moment? They've had a couple of good wins recently, John, and they've caught your eye a little bit.
Slightly, yes. 2 wins out of 5, 2 draws, 1 defeat, 9 goals. They're looking quite good. One player, maybe fantasy players might be interested in, is Pavel Savitsky, ex-Leeds and ex-Malmö, of course, and he's back in the league now. And he's just picked up a little bit of form lately and been a little bit responsible for their rise in form, with 2 wins in the last 3. I think they've had relatively easy games. I think Örebro are one of the worst teams in the league, and they gave them a 4-2 spanking. GIF Sundsvall are not in good form at the moment, and they beat them 3-1, and then they drew at Östersund. But EFK beat them 3-0 quite comfortably. So the jury's still out for me on Elfsborg. Like I said before, I think their manager has got something to prove this season. But so far, they're looking quite good. I'm not going to be down on them. They've got some good players as well. Holman, Sabitsky as well, as I mentioned. Levi is quite a good player. He scored 2 goals. So, Per Frick, they do have some talent in their ranks, actually, when you look at their squad. So Kevin Cabran as well. I know you said he's a bit inconsistent, but they have a little bit of talent. So bigger tests to come. I think they've got Sirius away, then Norrköping, then Malmö away. So let's see where they are in 3 games' time. But a good run for them so far.
Yeah, Levi was ex-Rosenborg, I do believe, if that's the same Levi anyway. Again, an inconsistent sort of player. In 1 minute can be brilliant, and the next minute can be sort of crap, really. And Cabran can have his brilliant moments. But yeah, they're doing well. Let's keep an eye on them, Elfsborg. Down towards the bottom of the table. Well, at the start of the season, you predicted Sirius were going to have a tough year. They did start with a couple of wins, but it's starting to go a little bit pear-shaped for them now. Do you think it's going to keep getting worse?
Well, the stats are okay. The underlying stats aren't too bad. They're not bottom feeders by any sense of the imagination. They're down to 7th. Just dried up a little bit in terms of form after 2 wins in a row. Playing, Kalmar and AFC Eskilstuna, it's a fairly kind run to begin, but they had AIK and Malmö. Understandably lost those and then drew at Falkenberg. So they've got a couple of interesting players in their squad. But yeah, just signs that maybe things are starting to slow down slightly for them.
Who right now do you think is the worst team in the Allsvenskan? Who really is not playing very well?
Örebro for me. They're stinking the joint out, unfortunately. I mean, they got a massive win against OIK, actually, to be fair to them. Beat the champions, which,
How's that possible, I think?
Quite unexpected, yeah. A very late goal, nice goal as well, by Rogic, who scored 2 in that game. But yeah, I mean, the bottom of the table, they've conceded 10 in 5. They're not doing much. I don't expect them to do much. I said in the season preview podcast they'll struggle. They are struggling quite badly, probably worse than I expected, in fact. I worry for them, to be honest. I don't think the Carlos Strandberg is going to be enough to really rescue them. I mentioned they lost roughly more than 50% of their goals from last season, thanks to the losses of Igbo and Anike and Nahir Besara. And I just think that's too much for them to bear. I really do worry about them, to be honest. Falkenberg are the other ones who are sort of near the bottom, but their underlying statistics are quite good. They're doing fine, to be honest, according to the stats. I don't know if that's because they've had some big chances, penalties and the like, but they're actually near the top of the expected goal charts. They're 2nd in the whole league in terms of expected goals. So, do we believe in stats, or is it a bit a bit skew-if? But that's the fact, really. That they're ahead of Häcken, who are 3rd, and behind Malmö in terms of expected goals. So Falkenberg, although they're near the bottom, they're not looking too bad. But Örebro, for me, they're quite smelly.
I actually agree with you about Falkenberg. If you look at the teams they've lost against, they're against sides that you would expect. Norrköping, Häcken and Östersunds. They've kept 2 clean sheets at home. And, in the matches that matter, I mean, if they're going to stay up, they're going to have to do it in that mini league at the bottom, aren't they? And so far, they've got 4 points out of those matches against sort of poorer sides. So, yeah, I think there's certainly hope for Falkenberg, and want to keep an eye on there. They might be a little bit better than their position suggests. So, well, I think that pretty much covers it for Sweden's at the moment, John.
Well, yes, but before we go, I have a question for you, Steve.
Oh.
Can you put this sequence into order or make sense of it? 8, 63, 18, 24.
What's that again? 8, 63,
18,
18,
24.
24. But it's late at night, and maths, although, I'm all right at maths. Goodness me. No. There's no pattern here off the top of my head.
Those are our positions in the fantasy leagues that we have created at present. Now you are 8th in the Eliteserien league, and I am in 63rd, and I'm 18th in the Allsvenskan league, and you're 24th. And you're actually in the relegation zone there, Steve, because it's a 26-man league. So that's the pattern for you there.
I'm going to be completely reshaping my side in the Allsvenskan. I'm going to use a wild card week because I'm not happy with a lot of the players that I've got in there, to be honest with you, John. But yeah, I've been fairly solid in the Norwegian, in the Eliteserien one. In fact, there's been some good scorers in that league, actually. Some quite impressive figures from a number of competitors, and we welcome anyone who wants to join those leagues. We will send out some join codes on Twitter for you. You can join.
Yeah, you've got some competition there, Steve. I think this season you're still top 8 in Norway, which is good. But I've been looking at the tables, and there's been some high rollers in both leagues. Someone in the Allsvenskan league, Captain Sabitsky this week, which is a bit of a masterstroke. And Elfsborg look to be a team that people are starting to wake up to. So that's one to maybe consider. I'll be keeping an eye on them. But yeah, if you want to join those leagues, we'll be posting links on our Twitter page at Nordic Footpod and also on Nordic Football Podcast on Facebook. So follow us and like us on those pages. And yeah, we'll post the code. We do it regularly, post the league table. Currently top of the league is Neeps versus Swedes, Ian Reid. So well done to you. And top of the Eliteserien Fantasy League is a guy called FPL Graphics, Joe M. So that's the man there, Steve, to target. And yeah, it's been fun so far. I'm quite enjoying it, actually. And we've gained quite a lot of new followers. So thanks to everyone who's joined and playing FPL. And I hope this podcast has been useful in gaining some intel, inside information.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and the fantasy it's really good to see that a lot of interest up in the fantasy leagues, in Eliteserien and Allsvenskan, and I think it can only grow some more, really. So join our leagues. I hope everyone's been enjoying my little videos I've been posting up every now and then on some Eliteserien fantasy advice.
Where can we find that?
On the Nordic Football Podcast YouTube channel. Subscribe to that channel. And you'll get notifications when these videos come in. The fantasy videos are only accessible on the YouTube channel. They're not a podcast. They're not on any other format apart from the YouTube. So get viewing on there specifically for that. There's no set plan when I do them, but probably once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Considering my league position in 63rd, I think I'm going to have to start subscribing to that myself.
Well, you've been improving. You weren't down in the bottom 5 at one point. You have.
Yeah, and you posted it on Twitter straight away after one round. Yeah, that was kind of you. Thank you. Name dropped me as well and everything, but I haven't actually changed my team since the beginning of the season, so I might need to pay Norway a little bit more attention there via your very impressive YouTube channel.
Well, I think I need to do a bit of research into Sweden as well. In the relegation zone there.
You can't be getting relegated, Steve. We'll have to get a new co-host.
Maybe I can survive by the playoff. Do a Kalmar, as you said. But
for the weekend is, maybe you should stock up on Djurgården players against Norrköping. It might be an upset there coming, but yeah, we'll see.
It's weird because I added that Islamovic from Ostersund because I thought he'd get a few goals against. I think it was Elfsborg at the weekend. He did sod all. I forgot to actually take him out of the team, and he scores a goal against AFC away. So it's a funny old game, isn't it? But
I think from my point of view, my only Malmö player is Romain Gol, who's not even playing at the moment. So I'm going to be making some changes, I think, soon. I can't be 8. I'm not having 18. It'd be good to see some more people join that league if you get a chance. If you like English football, let's push it up to over 30 and see if we can. Even further down.
Let's get a 50-team league, and then I can at least say, hopefully I'll be. Well, I'm struggling, aren't I, in that fantasy league at the moment? It's a battle for survival. Anyway, so good podcast, and we'll look forward to doing it again very soon. Thanks very much, John. Thanks very much to our guest, Gunnhild Toldnes, again, and we'll see you all again very soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody.